Today in Shack, we remember and we honor a legend in ham radio and specifically low band DXing. We also talk about attics and why they're maybe the best and worst place to put your antennas. Finally, we talk about after you pass your exam at the VE session, what happens next, and how long it might take to get your amateur radio license. All coming up. So this week we talk about an absolute legend in ham radio, somebody who I've admired for a long time and who I've learned a lot of things from. None other than John Devoldere, ON4UN, Oscar November 4, United November. John was one of these few people who really could, and this is no kidding, be an authority on ham radio. And there were really few other people like John in this hobby, service, or pastime. And I don't say this lightly because there are a lot of people who do a lot of great things in amateur radio, but John basically was a step above and beyond. I mean, talking about, not only was he an author of the low band DXing book, ON4UN's low band DXing, but the way he had his station, I mean, he would basically be the first in any pileup, and he would run with the best of them. He would, you heard John on air, everybody else had to clear the way and stand by. I remember working him the first time. I was actually mobile on 20 meters, and he was loud and clear. And I worked him on the first try. I mean, for Europe, that was something else, Others have memories of him. I mean, my friend Peter W2IRT talks about meeting him in Friedrichshafen, the big ham fest in Europe, big ham convention in Europe. And, a lot of people got signed books from him. And David Siddall, K3ZJ, he talked about where he was in Taiwan. And in Taiwan, of course, in Asia, the situation with noise is a lot worse than it is in North America. So he was talking about the local noise on 160 meters, and he was trying to get access for the locals on 160 meters. And the rest of the Europeans were coming in weak like dishwater. And then John ON4UN came in strong like a local. And this was a long time ago, not to say John would do this, but this was the days before we had remotes and people, claiming to be somewhere where they were not, and they actually use a local remote. But no, John was genuinely strong, and he definitely knew his stuff. So the first time I actually got a hold of his book, my friend Leon 9Z4BM in Trinidad, he wanted a copy of the book Low Band DXing, because Leon is a big antenna builder in Trinidad. He's probably the most famous one when it comes to antennas. So Leon asked for a copy of the book, and I began looking through it, and I'm like, this is pretty interesting. So I ordered a copy for myself. This was back in 2006. And I read so much and I learned so much, and I've gotten every edition since then. I've even picked up some older editions, so I pretty much have them all. And John would tell you not only about antennas, he'd tell about radios, receivers. He'd tell about receiving antennas, which is something I'm going to talk about one day in a future video. But he talked about receiving antennas, especially if you operate 160 meters. You're going to have to learn how to receive, or even 80 or 40 meters. It's not just a matter of throwing up a transmit antenna and then you receive on that. You can do that, but it's not going to be optimal. But John was really, truly an authority on these sort of things. So I'm glad to have made contact with him. I'm glad to have known him. He was a big supporter of ARL, and he was a big supporter of me in ARL, that he told me privately. So I'm very happy that he was able to pass on his knowledge. And I say I want to be like him. Well, I want to be like him where I pass on my knowledge as well. And I try to do that every day. I try to help hams, not only on this channel, but you see me on social media. I go and I answer questions, random questions by people, just because I want to help them. And that's no accident. I do that because I want to help people. I generally want people to, to learn and grow. And a side benefit, of course, is that they will respect me as an authority on, on this stuff. But it's not really about me. It's about, what will people remember you for when you're gone? Because we're not, you think about your own final destiny, as hard as it seems. And you think about what happens when you're gone. I mean, forget about, your beliefs in afterlife or whatever. We all have different beliefs in it. But I think, though, that your legacy here in whatever you were known for should be good. And definitely, we should all try to be like John. So, John, we miss you, 73, and thanks for the QSOs. Our first question today. I live in a homeowners association, and I cannot put up any antennas outside. However, I do have a decent sized attic, and I can put my antennas in there. Will this be good, and will this work? And of course, this is assuming the HOA lets me put the antenna there. That's a really good question. And I'll preface it by saying that the answer is yes and no, but it's mostly yes. And there are a lot of hams who do this, but there are some caveats. So, yes, you can put an antenna in the attic. There are a lot of people who receive and transmit antennas in their attic, and they work very well. And they're able to get out, especially if they use low power. And they're not really damaging anything. Of course, if you can use high power, you can use it. But generally, I would recommend using low power for several reasons. One, if your attic is anything like mine, it has a lot of electrical wiring inside of it. And I even have data cabling and wiring in my attic. So the potential for messing up something, for getting RF into something where it doesn't belong, is very high. This is why I say you should use low power. And low power could mean 100 watts. It doesn't have to mean something like 5 watts QRP. But with modes like FT8 and such, you have that option to use low power. So that's an option. But, it's not so straightforward. I mean, yeah, you have the wiring there and you're worried about getting into the wiring. But what about things getting out of the wiring into your receive setup? You're in close proximity now to where you have things like cable TV, first of all. And cable TV is special. We're going to set that aside and talk about that. Where you have electrical wiring, power lines that have 60 hertz AC hum, the noise, and then you definitely don't want that getting into your radio signals. Or you have maybe like Cat 5, Cat 6 cable, and those could present an issue as well. Of course, if they're properly terminated Cat 5, Cat 6, they're a twisted pair and that's supposed to null out the noise. Better yet, if they're shielded, that could work. So that, that's a consideration. But so those are some things to look at. Then there's some things that are not so obvious. Maybe if your roof has some sort of metallic coating on it, right? Like, for example, some people have metallic roofs. I think some people have metallic flashing on their roofs, and metallic coatings for thermal reasons, insulation or whatever. That could present a problem because, remember, RF doesn't really go through metal, so that could present a problem. The other thing to look out for is if you transmit high power and your antenna is next to wood, if you have an ISWR, for example, or you have some other condition that causes your antenna to flash over an arc, it could result in a fire in your house. So you got to be very careful with that. So you might want to keep some distance. Some people, they staple up the wire in the attic rafters and it works for them. Okay. Some people suspend it in there. Some people put VHF and UHF antennas in the attic in the middle of it. That's fine too. And that might be less risky because you're generally using lower power, and these antennas are small enough where they could be gain antennas and not be so big. But of course, an attic is going to be a compromise, but it's better than operating with an indoor antenna or a low antenna, low to the ground. And so it's going to be better. Cable TV. Let's talk about that for a minute. So technically, cable TV, I mean, legally, it's supposed to be a closed loop, right? The FCC has requirements that cable operators do certification that their systems are not leaking any RF, particularly leaking out RF, because they use frequencies in cable that are in critical services like aircraft and also the amateur band. I think the amateur band's on cable TV channel 18. And I had a situation in Trinidad where my friend, Silent Key now, Sanker 9Y4 SP, he had a situation where he was getting into the neighbor's cable and they heard him on channel 18. The funny thing is, I think channel 18 was CNN. Joke all you want. Maybe he was better than the content on CNN at that time. I'm joking. I'm only joking. Not political. But he was getting into them, and they complained to the cable company. And the cable company complained to him and said, hey, you're interfering with our stuff. Well, of course, they don't have the FCC there. They have different, the Telecommunications Authority. But the Telecommunications Authority still went and said, nope, your cable's supposed to be a closed loop. They went to the customer's house and they found a bunch of illegal connections. They found them using substandard cable that wasn't properly terminated inside the house, running all over the place. So this thing was picking up RF like a sponge, and it was generally, there was no way to win. So eventually all that got shut down. The cable company used quad shielded RG6, and then everything was hunky-dory. Well, okay, but if you have your VHF antennas in close proximity to your cable stuff in your attic, because a lot of cable companies, they use the attic to run cable. They use the attic or the basement. Cable guy told me how the worst part of his job was basically going through basements all day. But some people, they put in the attic. And then if you have your antennas in close proximity to cable wiring, it's going to probably cause a problem. The way you mitigate that is you keep distance. I mean, there's nothing like physical separation. Physical separation helps reduce interference because obviously the transmitted field strength is not going to be nearby. Reduce your power, and of course you have to comply with the FCC rule that says use the minimum amount of power required. And finally, use good cable. I mean, RG6 quad shield is kind of overkill, but the quad shield is better in terms of keeping out unwanted RF. Make sure your connectors are properly terminated. Use compression quality RF connectors. I use the Digicon connectors DS6, and which is a staple. I put that on the quad shield, and the quad shield connectors are usually green insulation in terms of in the compression connectors. So you got to watch out for that. And other considerations with attic antennas, make sure you're properly physically mounted, and it might be tough to ground them, but you should still comply with the National Electric Code grounding your antennas. But you're obviously not going to be able to run a ground wire outside, so you might have to find some other way. There might be a cold water pipe up there you could use, but a lot of water pipes now are plastic, and it's probably not going to suffice anyway. Running through the electrical ground might be a little problematic. Tell me if you have any suggestions in the comments below, whether how you ground your attic antenna installation. I'm interested to hear. Okay, and consider as well the bands that you're going to run. You're probably going to have room in your attic to run an HF antenna for 20 meters or even 40 meters. It's going to be shorter. It's probably going to be loaded, meaning that you're going to have coils on it or some other component that allows you to shorten the antenna physically yet keep it the same length electrically. And like I mentioned, VHF, UHF antennas are always fine. All right, so that is, one more thing. If you're using feed line, you should definitely use coaxial cable rather than open wire line, which is basically like the twin lead, because you have less chance of passing near other wires and causing problems, or less chance of it interacting with metal in your roof. And finally, yes, I knew there was one more thing. If you do have solar panels on your roof and you have an attic antenna, you might be in for some problems, because one is the solar panels, some of these inverters are not really RF friendly. I mean, they spew out a lot of interference. So check with your solar company, the installers, and the company that sells your solar, and also check to see if they're good with RF. If you're an ARRL member, you can ask the ARRL lab, and they will be able to tell you a little bit about solar. I know a few of them who've helped people, so you can definitely do that. But Bob Bruninga, WB4 APR, and you'll know him as a guy that invented APRS. He has a book on energy choices for the radio amateur, and check it out. It's a really good book. I have a copy, and I really enjoyed reading the book. He talks a lot about alternative energy, so this is a good consideration, especially now they have like solar panels that are basically a replacement for roof tiles. Tesla makes them, and you have solar panels on the roof. You have the inverters and everything, and a lot of these inverters are computerized, and they might get crazy with RF. If you have any experience with those, let me know in the comments. I might feature them on a future show. Okay, that's that. Next we talk about after you pass your exam. Now what? So you went and did it. You went and you took a VE exam, either virtually, online, or you took it in person at a test center. Congratulations. And whether you get a tech or general or extra, like I did, I got an extra in the same sitting. You're probably wondering what next. So let's start off with the tech exam and any other exam where this is the first time you're sitting and you got you passed your exam. So depending on the VEC and depending on their procedures, some VECs will automatically submit it electronically. Sorry, not automatically. Electronically submit the results to the FCC, and the teams will electronically upload to the VEC. And by the way, all of them do it electronically to the FCC. I should clarify. The teams in some VECs, they do it electronically, where they would go on a website and upload the test data, and then the VEC itself, who actually is the one coordinating the exams, not the teams, but the VEC team itself is responsible for administering the exams. So the VEC, like ARRL or Laurel or W5YI, they will then take that and then send it to the FCC, and then you'll get a license. So some of them, like the ARRL, do still primarily by mail, although the ARRL does have electronic submission. With some of them, you're going to see a license, probably a call sign by the next day or even the next few hours, because electronic, you don't have to deal with the postal service. But some of them you're going to have to wait 2 weeks because of the postal service. So that's what happens. So what happens next is, well, if you have an FRN, you can now then log into the FCC portal, and you should see your license in the FCC database there. If you've been issued a license, and then you'll be able to get an authorization. Today they send you an email with a link to go and download your authorization. The FCC no longer mails licenses to you. They used to do it like automatically. Now you have to request it. You can, when you sign up for your FRN, You can automatically request to get a printed copy from the FCC. Back in the day when I got my license, it was a nice, it was still printed on a laser printer, but it was printed on basket weave security paper. Today, to save money, they went with plain copy or recycled paper because, it saved them a ton of money. And so that's how you're going to get it now. But as a result, a lot of places, especially one, Department of Motor Vehicles for obtaining amateur radio license plates, they now, they kind of view that with skepticism. They say, well, this is printed on plain paper. How do we know it's authentic? So the FCC went and put a big watermark on it that said official copy, that anybody could do in Photoshop, but I digress. So now it's emblazoned with a big official copy thing. And you can take that to your DMV and get the license, even the PDF copy. Fear not. If you want one without that big ugly watermark, you can actually go to a site like AE7Q, Alpha Echo 7 Quebec.com, and download a reference copy. So what the reference copy is where the third-party site takes the data from the FCC database and then puts it in its own graphics. And then that graphic now contains your data, but it looks prettier. Some have taken this even further. They took the old FCC, because the FCC used to give you a nice piece of paper that looked like it was printed by the US Mint, and it has like all sorts of nice colors on it. And it would say amateur radio technician extra general certificate, advanced or whatever. And some hams still offer that. There are several vendors who would offer it on a plaque. I got one on a plaque from a vendor, it's great. It's on my wall. It is really nice. And they use the same basket weave security paper that they used to have on the licenses. So it's real nice. Okay. Like I said, congratulations. Welcome. The next thing you're probably going to get also a few mailers from different ham radio organizations. I know some of them send out, like some of the ham radio manufacturers. One of them, I think, sends out a catalog to you. There's the ARRL, who will then send out a mailing to you telling you congratulations and, of course, encouraging you to join. Full disclosure, of course, everybody knows this. I'm a member of the ARRL. I'm a life member, and, of course, I'm a director of the ARRL. But the ARRL, I would strongly consider urging you to join the ARRL, because there are a lot of benefits you can have, especially, as I previously mentioned, the technical information service, which allows you to get questions from a lab engineer via telephone. You can pick up the telephone and call them, or you can email them and they'll give you an authoritative, well-researched answer to any of your technical questions. Of course, you can still watch me on YouTube, and I do appreciate all of you who watch, like, and subscribe. And speaking of which, okay, one thing I did forget to mention was that if you are doing an upgrade, for example, from tech to general, or general to extra, or tech to extra, you can immediately use your privileges once you pass the exam. So what you do is, let's say if you want to go, let's say you upgraded to general and you want to go on 20 meter phone, you go on 20 meter phone in the general portion and you sign your call sign stroke Alpha Golf for general, right? If you go in the, if you pass your extra and you want to operate in the extra segment, you sign stroke Alpha Echo. So for example, if your call sign is KC4XYZ, and you sign and you upgrade it to extra, you would go KC4XYZ stroke Alpha Echo. Now, one more thing is, you don't have to sign like that if you're using your old privileges. So if you're just going back in the general portion, if you're a general, or if you're just on technician on a repeater or something, you don't have to sign with these additional indicators. But you do have to do it if you're using your new privileges while you're waiting for an upgrade. And of course, once it appears in the FCC database, you are good to go. You don't need to use those indicators. One more thing you might not have known: if you're a novice and you're upgrading to technician, well, congratulations, welcome to the future. Just kidding. If you're a novice and upgrading to technician, you use stroke Kilo Tango. There's so few of them. I'm wondering if anybody is a novice here watching the channel. We'll see. If you know any novices, bring them on. I'd like to talk to them. 73, and I'll talk to you later. And to RJ.